Sounded sarcastic, it's not. But anyway, so great, thanks for coming. We're going to have two speakers tonight. Chris is going to talk about page speed, and if Mark hasn't run away, he's going to he's going to talk after the break, and then we'll do after the second talk. We'll have some networking, just hang around, and then we'll go across the road for a minify, just a beer and pizza or whatever you want to have. So if everyone can make it to that, that'd be great. It'd be really good if everyone came. And otherwise, hand over to Chris.
Thank you, Tom.
Great.
Hello, everybody.
Let's clap.
Yes. So, nice round of applause. So, I'll be talking about page speed, why it's important, and giving you some hot tips for improving the speed of your websites. Just briefly, who am I? I'm Chris. I've been running a SaaS business called artweb.com for the last 8 years. I'm also the co-founder of Tokyo Cheapo, which is a fairly popular blog about doing stuff on the cheap in Tokyo. I sporadically do a philosophy, business, nonsense podcast, Hobo CEO, and some of you know me for some general silliness. Anyway, we're here to talk about page speed. Quickly, just want to get an idea of the technical ability of the audience. So a quick pop quiz, just kind of nod or wave or smile if you know what I'm talking about. So who doesn't have intro music on their website? Good, I think everyone, yes. Who knows what HTML and CSS stands for?
If people didn't put their hand up, does it mean they don't have a website or they do have music?
It means they have to leave the room. So, and you know the difference between cache and cache. So if you qualify, then you are a page speed puppy. Well done. So next level. You know what a CDN is? Yeah. It's Content Delivery Network. You don't have massive images scaled down to tiny thumbnails on your website. And you've at least tried some sort of page speed test on your website. So seeing some nods here still. Okay, well done. You chaps made it to Page Speed Panda. Okay, the next level. This is a bit of a jump. Who knows what TTL stands for? There's some nodding here, yeah. So time to live. We'll get back to that later. You're actually using a CDN, and your JavaScript and CSS is all nicely combined and minified. I'm still seeing some nodding. Excellent. And you're using a cache somewhere? Cool. You are a page speed ninja.
I think
well done.
It's really proper nerd.
Yeah. Just trying to get the feel. Anyway, there is one more level. You'll be pleased to know. So all your sites are hand coded in flat HTML with no images at all. Every page scores 100% on the Google page speed test, and everything has a time to live of 1 million years. So if you reach this level, you are a page speed Nazi. And some of my friends are page speed Nazis. PageSpeed.io, they're an agency, and they are actually German as well. That's what they call themselves. Okay, so why does page speed matter? Why bother with having a fast website? Number one, it's good user experience. No one likes to wait around for a website to load. And as Rob Lang, the Gengo CEO, famously said on the last, I think it was the last meetup, anyway, he said something about pages taking too long with his company. Anyway, fast websites is good UX. That's number one. And as we know, good UX equals more revenue. And this is very much the case with big e-commerce sites. Many of the big e-commerce sites have similar statistics. One I've pulled out here is every 100 milliseconds of page load time, Amazon shaved off their average paid load, their revenue increased by 1%. And when you're talking Amazon levels, that's a huge amount of money. So, number 3, this one's interesting. There was a survey of mobile users, and apparently 21% of them would expect a website to load the same speed on their mobile device as on their desktop. And of course this is a real pain in the arse for web developers because mobiles typically have lower bandwidth, lower processors, so they're going to load faster anyway, load slower anyway. Number 4, Google, our big brother and good citizen of the internet, or good policeman of the internet, wants the web to have a better user experience, and speed is part of this. And they publish this on their webmaster guidelines. They tell people to make their websites faster, and they do it with a stick. They penalize websites which are too slow. So if your website's a little bit slow loading, your rankings in the search engine, in Google's results, are going to be lower. Little case study, Tokyo Cheapo. So this is our average server response time over the last year. It's kind of usually hovering around half a second to a second. And around about December and January this year, we dropped the ball. I messed up some cache configuration or something. It took me a month to realize.
How are you measuring this?
This is Google Analytics.
Right.
If you've got analytics running on your website, there's a report called Site Speed, and it will tell you various metrics about how long your web pages are taking to load. So you see this little dip here. This is a drop in our search rankings. This second graph is the number of visitors we get from Google search results. And you can see once we fixed it again afterwards, it took off again. So fast websites rank better. And final reason I have today is just general geek points. You know, there's a little kind of ego satisfaction with having a 99th percentile page speed. Okay, so that's why. So let's look at what. What is making your websites slower? Can anybody identify?
Read that?
It's not for reading.
Okay.
It's for looking. Can anyone tell me what this is a diagram of?
It's all the elements and the time to load.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
I've actually seen the presentation before. So
yeah.
I
Tom's
should've kept
cheating.
quiet.
You're cheating. Get out.
Amount of cats in your slideshow.
Correct. And where they feature in the slideshow, that's the red marks. Anyway, this is what's called a waterfall. It's a graph of how long a page and all the elements on the page take to load. This axis is time, and these horizontal things represent an element on the page. So you've got the HTML page itself, CSS files, images, JavaScript, widgets, all kinds of stuff. What I want you to notice is how small that initial HTML page is out of the whole page load time. So basically, what's taking all the time for the page to load and render is everything that happens after the HTML page has reached your browser. So this means it's all the JavaScript, the CSS, and the images. That's typically what's making the user experience slow.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
There's a little bunch at the bottom that seems to not even start for a while. What's that?
That is, I don't know, Tom. It's the rabbits. I think it's probably like it's like some widget or something which I don't know. I could tell you afterwards in the pub. Sorry. So let's just put the timer on. I forgot to put the timer. It's very important to time yourself in presentations because then you know when you're getting slow and boring.
I will tell you.
Okay. Apps, on the other hand, are slightly different. If you're doing some sort of web app with an Ajax library, typically what happens... is anyone using Asana? Yeah. So you'll recognize the first thing that happens when you load up Asana is you have to sit there and wait for 10, 15 seconds for it to actually load. So it's loading all these Ajax libraries and maybe doing some pre-processing behind the scenes. But once it's loaded, things are quite snappy. It's just little Ajax requests incrementally updating the page. So for apps, it's often slightly different. There's a kind of a really long load time at the beginning, and then it's quite fast. So anyway, the tips I'm going to be talking about today are kind of relevant for both scenarios. How to get fasts. So let's start with the tips. That's cat number 1. And tip number 1, via negativa, which is a pretentious Latin way of saying take away stuff that you don't need, rather than looking at trying to add things. So take away the crap rather than put in the good stuff. I'm sure we've all seen websites like Jim's blog here, plastered with buttons and widgets and everything. Typically, widgets load lots of JavaScript. Maybe they fire off a lot of little requests to get people's avatars. They can really slow down your page load time. They can contribute a significant amount of the bandwidth. If you overdo it, you're really dropping the ball. So one of the first things to do is to look at what you can take away. Case study number 2. We had, is anyone familiar with this type of Facebook widget with like the faces? So we had that in our footer for a while. And when I was doing an audit, I realized it was 300 kilobytes and about 20 requests, which is a huge, huge amount of bandwidth and time. So I decided to get rid of it. And then I came up with the idea of just taking a screenshot of it and just having a little JPEG there instead. So I kind of best of both worlds. I had my fake widget and just 15 kilobytes. It goes to the Facebook page.
Oh, okay.
So it's
like a banner, basically.
Basically, yeah.
Who are the people
That's pretty cool.
in your fake?
Say again?
Who are the people in your fake widget?
Can anyone? I don't know. Can anyone identify them? Any mutual friends like us?
It's like Jeff Lennon in one of the yellow.
I hope so. I hope so.
But before you did that 300 kilobytes, 20 requests presumably took some time.
Yeah.
And what was happening during that time? What was the user seeing?
So it's at the bottom of the page, and I can't remember whether it's a synchronous or asynchronous script. So
So it could have been blank, or the picture's filling in, or something.
it could have. The worst case scenario is it would have slowed the whole page from rendering.
Mm.
But I think what happens is it's just people don't see it because it's below the fold. But what it does do is I'm kind of concerned about what Google thinks about my website, and it does actually contribute to the overall final page speed. And
Right.
I'd rather take it away than have it in there.
Right.
So it's like we don't really need that widget. It's not that important to our websites.
Yeah.
Frankly, we could just do without that box. It's not that important. So like the principle is just do you really need this widget? Do you really need this plugin? Do you really need this whatever? So it's taking away things that you don't need. Some other ideas of things that you can jettison. Maybe do an audit if there's some sort of old scripts and CSS in there that some old developer left in and you can just get rid of. Oversized images, that's a classic one, because big images are a huge amount of data. If you've got something that's 1500 by 1500, it's massively bigger than something that's 150 by 150. So if you're not scaling your images properly, then you could be really slowing your site down. And also just not having too many images, especially for mobile views. If you've got a responsive template, then maybe you want to hide a lot of the images on the mobile view. Sorry, any questions so far?
When you say hi,
Yeah, how do you do that?
I'm pretty sure you guys are probably better at this than me. I'm pretty sure that if you if it's not displayed in the CSS rules, then the browser won't try and load the images. So you could just use, if you're using Bootstrap or something, you could use the class mobile hidden or whatever it is, and you'd still have the images in the HTML, but because the CSS is telling the browser not to display that to the mobile, it shouldn't try and get those images.
Just too low.
Say again?
Just hiding doesn't work actually.
Okay.
Because when you're resizing, it just immediately appears.
Mhm.
And Bootstrap, you resize the screen, and it's like switched from mobile to just
Yeah.
desktop view, and it immediately appears. So probably they're not.
So it's better to do it at the HTML level, just not have them in
Yeah, but
the
it's
output.
very difficult now.
It's
There's
It's not impossible. You can do user agent sniffing. You can have a PHP library which looks at the browser requests and tells you whether it's a mobile or a desktop viewing it. That's what we do on Tokyo Cheapo. Anyway, let me move on. So the next topic is combining and minifying. This is talking about JavaScript files and CSS files. So typically, a modern website is going to have lots of different scripts, lots of different CSS files, which is good. It's good for development to logically have different libraries, different files for different things. But when it comes to production, the best case scenario is to combine them into less files. So you're creating less requests per each page load. Also, you have this bottleneck problem. Web browsers will only open a fixed number of connections at once. So if you've got too many resources, it's going to wait till it's loaded the first lot before it loads the second lot. But if you're just able to combine all your scripts into one or two files, then they'll just load straight away. So, Business Cat, combine and minify, and you shall have speeds. So these are Business Cat's recommendations. There's some services which can do it for you automatically. Anyone heard of Cloudflare? There's others as well, but those are obviously the easiest ones. You just kind of configure this third-party service which sits in front of your website and automatically combines JavaScript files and combines CSS files. There's also WordPress plugins if you're using WordPress, and there's some nice build scripts for which will kind of help do this process for you. The bottom line is combining and minifying isn't something that you really want to be doing by hand, especially if you're kind of regularly updating, pushing new releases. You want it to be part of the build process, have this automatic script or service which looks at your files and like combines them into one. So the best case scenario is just having one CSS file and one JavaScript file. CSS goes in the head because that's got to load first. That tells the browser how to render the page. And the JavaScript, if possible, goes last because that's not necessarily needed for rendering the page. It's not always that simple though. I'm sure some of you have experienced this as well. You try combining some scripts and they start conflicting and not working. You've got to put things in the right order, and it can get a little bit tricky and need a bit of trial and error. And sometimes you just need to load some JavaScript early on in the page. So typically you might be having, rather than just the CSS file, the JavaScript file, you might have one CSS file, one JavaScript file, some naughty JavaScript file that doesn't play nice, and then the rest at the end. Also, versioning. I'm going to come back to this when we talk about caching, but these little files that you put out as part of this build process, it's very useful to have a version number in the file name. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So, any questions for Business Cat or me? Cool, I shall move on. CDN, Content Delivery Network. So this is the idea of using a global infrastructure of servers to host your images, scripts, and style sheets, and in some cases your HTML as well. So what this does is a user comes to visit your website, and the CDN will send the user to the closest server physically, which means things load much faster. And also you get parallel loading as well with different host names. Anyway, that's a bit techie, I'll skip that. Again, Cloudflare, this is a content delivery network as well. And there's several main services, Mac CDN, Amazon's CloudFront. Cloudflare is probably the easiest to use. Another thing is it fixes a lot of things for free. Content delivery networks are optimized for fast delivery. They're configured properly, and it outputs the right headers for caching and all these kind of techie things, which the page speed tests will often complain about. So just putting your stuff on a CDN can have a great benefit to the overall page speed of your website. And also you get the benefit of it being less of a load on your server, because you only send one request to your server and all the images and everything are going to the content delivery network. And so your server can serve more users and everything. This is a little technical, I'll skip that one. Okay, caching. Who knows what caching is? Okay, we're all kind of familiar. It's basically for those who don't know, it's the idea of storing a copy of something for fast retrieval. And a typical example on the internet is you have a cache server in front of your web server. So your web server takes a while to run its PHP or Ruby or whatever and spit out the HTML. If you've got a cache server in front of it, it just keeps a copy of those pages, and those can be served to a user ultra fast. And if it's something like Tokyo Cheapo, it's a blog, then this works very well, because our pages typically don't change very often, so there's no need for it to load dynamically. It's not like an app or something. Caching is quite complex. You've got all different layers of caching. You've got caching within your app. You've got cache within the browser. Anyway, it can be a little complex. The other tech term that I wanted to introduce is the idea of expiry, the time to live. So the cache needs to know how long it can store something. Is this thing going to go out of date today? Is it going to go out to date in a year's time? Is it going to go out to date in 5 seconds? So that's a key concept in caching, is how long could it be cached for? So here's caching. One of my first principles is the idea that you should try caching before you try optimizing, because it's often much easier to cache something than it is to rebuild your app so it's more efficient and works faster. And often there's no need to optimize. As you'll find, a lot of big sites are relying heavily on caching, and it's perhaps one of the number one ways that big websites speed up is by heavy use of caching. If you think about it, if you've got a website that's got 100 requests per second, and if you can store a copy of, like the homepage of a news website, it's getting 100 requests per second. If you can cache it for just 10 seconds, that's saving 1,000 page requests, which is significant. If you can cache it for a day, then that's potentially hundreds of thousands. So what does that mean to us, for us who have mere thousands of requests a day rather than millions? We can still cache our images and scripts and JavaScript, especially images, because images don't change very often. Scripts, JavaScript, CSS, these will be changing, but you can still cache them. And if we come back to the idea of versioning, there it is, you can use version numbers rather than expiry times. So you basically tell your cache to keep things forever, and when you push a new JavaScript file, it has a new version number in it, so the browser learns the new file. Finally, you want to ask yourself, does it matter if I'm serving old copies of my website as well? So Tokyo Cheapo, for example, we have a sidebar. It's a dynamically generated sidebar. It has the top 5 popular articles, which in theory is calculated on every page load. But it doesn't really matter. The people reading the site are interested in the articles. They don't care whether, the article about the kitten is more important than the article about the sushi or whatever. So we don't care. We cache for quite a long time. Even if our pages are out of date, basically the content is almost the same, so it doesn't matter. In some cases you can't. If you've got an app or something, then every request is a new request. Any questions on caching?
How much does it cost?
Well, about $50. I think he's got about 50 in his hand there.
Firstly, I think you said that already, but like dynamic content, like I don't know, Facebook, something like, okay, you said like 10 seconds can make a big difference already for Facebook, but if you have dynamic content which changes a lot, like comments or like like a news thread or something, like then you can't really apply caching that much, can you? Otherwise it just doesn't show up.
Well, Facebook will apply caching for short periods on certain elements, like just a few seconds. Like maybe your your marital status. Maybe it will cache that for a day, because most people don't change their marriage status within a day. And I don't know, you'll probably find that, I guess there will be some things which won't be cached at all, but things like avatars, maybe you've noticed that you look at somebody's avatar on the mobile and it's actually different when you look at the desktop website. So maybe they're caching the avatars for a day or 2 days. So you can basically, you can write complex rules for all your different elements. And when you've got a really super busy site, the kind of longer, just a few extra seconds makes a huge difference.
You might have noticed if you go to Facebook, they're showing kind of this empty stuff first, right? So they're loading those articles via JavaScript in the first place. And then if you reload, it's not always that the new articles are coming up. So, or the new posts are coming up.
That's quite good. That's quite good.
That's part algorithm, but part caching, I suppose, as well.
So I guess there's a famous saying that there are two hard problems in computer science, and naming and caching.
Yeah.
And then sometimes off by one errors.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
It's a complex.
caching and cache invalidation is
Yeah.
hard. So oftentimes, like time-based cache invalidation is one strategy, but sometimes if you're having an app like Facebook, you aren't going to necessarily say you want to cache something for this amount of time, but rather based on these conditions, I want to cache something, and if something else changes, invalidate that cache. So there is like algorithms that surround caching and how to deal with
For
it.
instance, we are caching stuff based on the last updated tag of the event. So we're recording when the event is going to update, for instance. And that is basically part of our caching.
So
Maybe we should use
Let's
Yeah.
let me finish. I've only got one more slide. So some tips for your back end. So I'm talking about that initial process of spitting out that first HTML page, because that can slow things down as well. Very briefly, on an infrastructure level, you want to split things up so it's modular. You've got a separate database server, separate web server. Maybe you've got something for processing images. So if you create things into separate modular services and servers, it helps you identify bottlenecks, helps you put resources where they're needed. Deep database query caching, that's something that you can often just switch on with a configuration. That makes a huge difference. Also, the database can often be a big bottleneck. Make sure you've got indexes in your database. And my final hot tip is if you might want to check what the DNS performance is for your website, because that's when somebody visits your website for the first time, they type in tokyochico.com, the browser has to look up what the IP address is, so that's the DNS lookup. And that can often take, if it's a slow DNS server, it might take a second, so that adds extra time to the page load. And you can often solve that just by switching to a better DNS provider. Most big ISPs are pretty fast, but anyway, we were doing our own DNS, which was pretty slow, so we moved on to Amazon's DNS, and now it's super fast. So, too long, didn't read. See what stuff you can take off of your website. try Cloudflare. And if you're using WordPress, install W3 Total Cache and turn off plugins that you don't need. And finally, the Chrome page speed plugin. That's really useful. That will, in your browser, tell you what's slow on your website and give you hints as to how to fix it.
Can I take a picture of that?
It's a bit like heckling, but it's different.
That's like the key.
It's like low quality heckling. Marvelous. Thank you for listening. So if you want to follow up with me, should I take questions?
Yeah, let's have some questions.
Mr. King.
I have a question.
Yes, that
I'll make it fast. Alright, sorry to bang on about money, but how much does a CDN cost?
That's a great question. Cloudflare is pretty much free for like any kind of small website.
Right.
We're using it for free on Tokyo Cheapo. Yeah, I think most of the major CDNs start pretty cheap. Yeah, Cloudflare is free, and that works pretty well.
So say for example, if you just put all your images on Dropbox and then just link to them from your site, would that work?
I don't know. I don't think Dropbox is really a CDN, so that might.
But some similar service. Like
You could put it on Amazon S3,
Right.
and that wouldn't cost much. Amazon CloudFront costs a bit more. We spend about $15 a month.
Oh right, so
for
it's quite reasonable.
Yeah, and we've, but I mean, Cloudflare's free. We're actually going to switch all our caching and CDN to Cloudflare because we can save $15 a month. Cheaper.
So how do they make it free?
How do they make it free?
They
It's a,
inject advertisement into you?
I don't think so. It's a premium service. So they're
It's an
Make-
amount of.
Yeah, so if you get more popular, you have to start paying basically, right?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but yes, probably.
And then it's going to be more expensive.
So, how have all these page speed optimizations increased the traffic or whatever on Tokyo Cheapos?
Well, remember that first diagram?
Yeah, so
I think it's made, we slowed down we went from about, 500 milliseconds to 1,500 milliseconds, and our rankings just tanked for a bit.
yeah, so definitely getting really slow makes it bad for the rankings, but similarly, when you improved the speed, did you see it?
I think
rank
it's
even, or-
it's like an 80-20 rule.
Okay.
Like if you're kind of in the 90th percentile, if you're faster than 90% of the internet, then you're probably not going to get better rankings by going up to the 95th percentile. So it's more ensuring that you're not slow rather than making sure that you're that geeky site with no images that's 99th percentile.
So what do you think, or do you know what Google is basing that off, the speed?
If you're running Google Analytics, then it knows.
Right, but that's reported back from the browser. So I just actually looked at that, and we have there's some Androids and whatever in there which are really really slow in loading time.
Yeah.
And yeah, our page totally sucks if I look at that.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not that bad if I use that. So I wonder if they're really using the data from analytics, which is based on.
They've got 2 points of data. One is their robot visiting your site and measuring that initial HTML page load time. And the other one is if you've got analytics installed, then they know everything.
Right.
But of course, other sites will render slowly on Android as well. So,
So what you're saying is if you remove analytics, you could be number one.
you got it.
You just never know.
Question.
I've got a question just generally about sort of kind of customer experience on the UX side of things. Whenever the page is loaded, have you done user testing first?
User testing on Tokyo Cheapo.
Yeah.
We've done some A/B testing. Yeah.
Sure, A/B testing. No, the only reason I say that is that whenever I've done studies in the past and pages have taken a long time to load, usually customers attribute that to either what they consider to be their crap internet connection or something, there's like a problem with the site. It's never an issue if there's like feedback given there, so if there's like a little ticking wheel indicating that there's stuff loading. The time when it's a showstopper is like when a dialog box appears with some JavaScript error in the browser. So providing there's nothing like that, I was just wondering that all these speed things are obviously very useful to display content, but is there any other kind of information or shortcuts you can have to kind of, I don't know, offset the actual user experience in terms of the end user experience, like loading wheels or anything else? Any tricks, basically? Sorry, was that-
Yeah, I mean,
Loading music.
yeah, there you go. I guess the example I had at the beginning was Asana. Asana is a web app which takes a while to load. That's got like a loading thing, so that reassures the user that there's nothing wrong. But I think, for typical websites, most of the time you should be able to produce something that loads within a few seconds. If you can't, then it's a special case.
I have an example for that. I used to do stuff with Apodo in the UK, and it's a travel website. And when you submit your search, it goes to, I don't know, it just takes ages. And we used to do user testing, and because it takes about 10 seconds, there's this tiny little piece of JavaScript in the middle of the page which said checking British Airways, checking United Airlines, checking something. And obviously it's rubbish, it's not really, but users loved it. They was like, oh, that's great, it's checking all those boxes. I like that. Oh, yeah. Just really bought it as a...
I'm just interested to see whether the general user base now is aware of like kind of speed hacks on a web page, whether we've got that level of tech savviness, or whether people still think that, oh, I'm connecting to the internet, which is the company over there, or something. And they just don't get that all of these things are happening in the background. They think it's their internet connection problem rather than the actual website.
I think you showed up a little bit late, I noticed, and
I
on
did.
one of his first slides.
I did happen to do the presentation yesterday, remember?
Oh yeah, he translated it. But the bit about Amazon seeing the what is it, 1% increase for.
Yeah,
Somehow
that's real hard evidence that page speed makes a huge difference. Like all the big commerce sites, like Amazon, 1% increase in revenue for every 100 milliseconds they shave off their page speed.
Okay, cool.
Should we have maybe one more question then, take a break.
I just have a comment. Something I saw once maybe about 5 years ago that I haven't seen again recently is for user experience. Something about loading something, and they purposely controlled the delay. So they would, I can't remember exactly, it was something like the way the loading bar worked. It would put in a delay and then show the image or whatever it was, and it appears faster than if you show it as soon as you get it. Like the way like you're waiting for the spinning wheel to get done or something like that. So yeah, so it's just kind of a little trickery.
Well, you mentioned Asana, and Slack also does this because there's a lot of JavaScript on the page, and so when you load Slack up, there's a screen that just says, "Hey, are you having a nice day?" And they put this up, and your brain is distracted from the fact that you're supposed to be getting to your work for a couple of seconds. And so I think these strategies like the spinning wheel or a message or this kind of Asana Slack, all these guys are doing this now in the right? So you can use that as a sort of a placeholder while the page is loading, if you have that sort of page.
But in this case, it was adding delay, actually.
Yeah.
Right. The user experience it seemed faster, but it was purposely slower.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, some iOS developer did that with they had a post about a calculator app they built, and they tried changing the splash screen from some kind of branded splash screen into basically a screenshot of the app, but you couldn't interact with it until the actual logic had finished loading. And the perceived load time of the app was, according to users, much faster than actually. It made no difference, right? It was just the different image they were showing at the start. But the users felt it loaded faster, even though the time that they could actually interact with the buttons was the same.
I don't know if they did that for speed though, are you sure?
They did it for perceived loading time, right?
Because there's also another,
I'll tell you what, let's have a break.
Let's have a break.
I forgot to mention one thing, which is that immediately after the break, before we have Mark's talk, we'll just sort of go around, and if anyone's got anything interesting, either a website or an app that they've seen, or an exhibition, or something they've launched, or anything they want to share, then we'll just kind of go around. Anyone can share anything they want. Well, maybe not anything, but anything that might be of interest.
Tips for the back end, maybe?
So.
I have one more question. What's Witter and how do we get onto it?
You need a kitten. You need a kitten.
So maybe have a think during the break, and otherwise let's have a 10-15 minute break. Thank
Marvellous.
you.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.